Before I begin, I need you to understand what this story is really about. On the surface, it's about how I lost my husband, the love of my life, and how his family showed up on my doorstep just days after his funeral to demand I give them our house. But it's so much more than that. This is a story about the kind of quiet, insidious greed that hides behind words like family and tradition. It is about the shock of discovering that the people who were supposed to be your support system in your darkest hour are actually just waiting to pick at the scraps of the life you built. But most of all, this is a story about a love so strong, so thoughtful, that it reached back from the grave to protect me in ways I never could have imagined. What they didn't know was that my husband knew them better than they knew themselves, and he had prepared for this. It's been 3 months since my husband Mark died. He was 36. A sudden cardiac arrest, the doctor said. 1 minute he was here. The next, he wasn't. We were married for 12 years, and the silence he left behind in our beautiful 4-bedroom house is a physical presence. It's a weight in the air. Every room I walk into, I still expect to see him. I expect to hear his booming laugh that could fill every corner of this place, or smell the coffee he'd always make for me in the mornings. The house itself feels emptier, colder. Just last night, I was standing in the living room, staring at the feature wall we painted that perfect shade of navy blue. I could almost feel the phantom sensation of the paintbrush in my hand, and I was hit with this flashback so vivid it knocked the air from my lungs. It was the first weekend after we moved in 6 years ago. We were covered in paint, exhausted, and deliriously happy. He'd dabbed a streak of blue on my nose, and I'd retaliated by getting it in his hair. He pulled me close, ignoring the paint between us, and whispered, "This house isn't just bricks and mortar, babe. It's our story. Every nail, every coat of paint, it's a page." He was always the planner, the organizer. I used to tease him about his color-coded spreadsheets for our finances and the meticulous way he filed every single document. He'd just smile and say, "You never know, it pays to be prepared." I had no idea back then just how important those late nights he spent organizing files in his office would become. I didn't know he wasn't just managing our finances. He was building a fortress around me. The funeral was a blur of black suits, awkward hugs, and whispered condolences. Mark's parents and his older sister, my sister-in-law, were surprisingly supportive. My mother-in-law, who always had this air of quiet disapproval because I chose a career as a software engineer instead of becoming a stay-at-home mom like her daughter, held my hand and cried. For a brief, naive moment, I thought that maybe this shared, devastating loss would finally bridge the gap between us. Mark's cousin, Sarah, was especially kind. She was the one who seemed to understand. She brought over a casserole, sat with me when I couldn't stand the silence, and even vented with me. "You know how my aunt and uncle can be," she'd said one afternoon, sipping tea at my kitchen table. "They're so traditional. They never really got the whole career woman thing, but they're hurting right now, so try to be patient with them." She positioned herself as my ally, a translator for their old-fashioned ways. I found myself confiding in her, telling her how scared I was to face the future alone, how overwhelming it all felt. "Don't you worry," she'd said, giving my hand a squeeze. "I'll run interference for you. We'll get you through this." For a fleeting moment with Sarah's support, I felt a glimmer of hope. I thought maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't have to navigate this nightmare completely alone. I was so wrong. The peace, the illusion of a family united in grief, lasted exactly 8 days after we buried my husband. They showed up unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon. My father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and my sister-in-law. They stood on my porch, not like grieving family, but like a somber, determined delegation. I let them in, my stomach twisting into a knot. My father-in-law started with a long, rambling speech about how, in times like these, family needs to stick together, and how they had been thinking about what was best for everyone. I just nodded, a sense of dread washing over me. Then, my mother-in-law's eyes scanned the living room before landing on the handcrafted rocking chair in the corner. It was the first piece of furniture Mark ever built, carved from dark walnut. His initials were intertwined with mine on the underside. It was priceless to me. She walked over and placed her hand on its smooth, polished back. Her voice was cold, stripped of any of the feigned sympathy from the funeral. Your husband made this for the children he hoped to have, she said, her words hitting me like stones. Well, my daughter has 3 beautiful children. They need this house. They need the space to grow. This chair, it belongs with his blood relatives. I couldn't speak. I just stared at her, my blood running cold. Then the bombshell dropped. My father-in-law laid out their plan. I was to give them the house. It would go to my sister-in-law and her family. I, a single woman who didn't need all this space, was to move into my sister-in-law's cramped 2-bedroom apartment. And to top it all off, they had the audacity to suggest I should pay her rent as part of the deal. It was, they claimed, what Mark would have wanted. The shock was so profound, it felt like a physical blow. When I finally found my voice, all I could manage was a choked, "No, absolutely not." My sister-in-law scoffed, muttering, "So selfish," under her breath. As they finally turned to leave, their faces were hard masks of resentment. My father-in-law paused at the door, turned back to me, and his voice was low and menacing. "You're making a terrible mistake," he said. "You'll find out soon enough that you can't stand against this family." His final words hung in the air long after the front door clicked shut. "You'll find out soon enough that you can't stand against this family." It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. For the first 2 days, the silence was almost worse than the confrontation. I walked around my own home like a ghost, jumping at every creak of the floorboards, my heart hammering in my chest every time a car slowed down on our street. The house, Mark's and my sanctuary, suddenly felt like a fishbowl. I felt watched, exposed, and terribly vulnerable. I was grieving the loss of my husband, and now I was living in fear of his family. Then, the phone calls started. It began with my mother-in-law. Her voice was syrupy sweet, dripping with false concern. "Honey, I know you're upset. You're not thinking clearly right now. We're just worried about you, all alone in that big place. Just reconsider our offer. It's what's best." When I politely but firmly told her my decision was final, the sweetness vanished, replaced by a cold bitterness. "You are tearing this family apart," she hissed before hanging up. Next, they weaponized the rest of the family. Calls came in from aunts and distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. They'd all heard the same twisted version of the story, that I was being selfish, that I was disrespecting Mark's memory, that I should think of my sister-in-law's poor children. Each call was another paper cut, another small wound designed to wear me down. I started screening my calls, my phone, once a lifeline, now a source of constant anxiety. The world I had built with Mark was shrinking, and this siege was closing in from all sides. But I had no idea how literal that siege was about to become. It happened on a Thursday night. A storm was rolling in, the wind rattling the windows, and I was curled up on the sofa trying to lose myself in a book I could not focus on. Around 10 p.m., I heard a faint noise at the front door. I froze, listening. It was probably just the wind. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. A soft, metallic scraping sound. The sound of a key being slid into a lock. My blood turned to ice. Mark and I were the only ones with keys. I crept off the sofa, my heart pounding against my ribs so hard I thought it would break through. I tiptoed to the door and peered through the peephole. The distorted fisheye view showed me my mother-in-law's face, her features tight with concentration as she jiggled the key in the lock. She had an old spare key we'd given her years ago for emergencies, one I had completely forgotten about.